Name is Valentin, and I'm project manager. I'm a business analyst and IT consultant. My main focus of what I'm doing is what I would call probably orchestrating the efforts of various IT specialists within the team for achieving the expected result. It usually involves thorough business analysis at the early stages, as well as identification of the tool sets and bringing required people together and streamlining certainly different processes like scope, cost, quality, risk, and probably resource management. I am working mostly with projects which focus on web, mobile, and desktop applications, and I'm doing that now for something like 10 or maybe 9, a bit less, 9 years. The webinar today is about a very exciting technology, GraphQL, and it will be presented by Yuri, who is a part of our DevArch team in Ukraine. He's a very experienced web developer. I know him for a while right now, and we have been doing a few projects. So I know Yuri is a very proficient person, and the one with whom it's very easy and actually pleasant to communicate. So before starting, let me just very briefly remind you about the agenda of this webinar, which should be actually very simple. So for the next 30 minutes or something like that, Yuri will take over and he will explain in details what GraphQL is and what is not, how it can be applied, and where you can get the most out of it. After that, we will take maybe something like 15 minutes for questions. I suggest if you will be having something, some question that will probably take more time than we can fit in, then we can just give you the email address, maybe some instant messenger contact of Yuri, so that you would continue this conversation afterwards. But just for saving our time, because everyone is busy here, I suggest we'll be allocating this 15 minutes for at least main questions that you might have. All right. So Yuri, if you are ready, please take over and start.
Yes, thank you, Valentin. Thank you. Yeah, we can go ahead with this. So, as Valentin presented, my name is Yuri, and I'm a web developer at DevArch. So today I want to dive in with you in an exciting piece of technology, and it is GraphQL. Actually, I am pretty new to this technology as well. I don't have actually any commercial experience with this right now, but I want to encourage our developers and to use this and try to take as many benefits as we can from this technology in future. So today, small on the agenda, we will be talking about what is GraphQL, GraphQL comparing to the traditional REST APIs, how does GraphQL works, and some queries and operation times. And as Valentin told, we will have some question and answers section. So yeah, if you would have any questions during our presentation, you're welcome. You can interrupt me. If it's short, we can just in a moment discuss it quickly and go ahead with other topics. So yeah. What is this actually, GraphQL? It's actually an alternative to build RESTful APIs, and it provides some significant advantages over the REST APIs, at least in certain scenarios. Generally, GraphQL were developed by Facebook, but it can be used by even a simpler application that are facing with some limits of traditional REST APIs interfaces. So for understanding, and let's imagine like we need to show some list of posts like we have in Facebook. And for each of the posts, you need to show a list of likes that includes also user names and user pictures. It's from technical side, it's currently sounds pretty simple. We can easily like change our existing APIs endpoints in a way we do it usually, and we can just add some extra data to this. For example, some array that contains everything we need as like user objects. So currently it looks very simple, but if we look forward and later, for example, if we decide to develop some mobile application, reveals that due to downloading some extra data, this mobile application starts working slower. So in this case, like normally in the past, we would just add some extra endpoint, and that will handle this and will fetch for some only needed specific data. But also we can also think about another factor, that different data stores in different sources. For example, something is stored in MySQL database, some another data is in MongoDB. So actually, here comes our GraphQL, and it can help us to solve these problems actually. So now what is GraphQL? To really explain it, I would compare it to the REST APIs. So REST API, it's a stateless client-independent API for exchanging data. So generally, it's like I'm a web developer, so I'm using JavaScript for developing. So we use a Node and Express.js to build such a application, but we don't store any session data. We don't care about the client. We only like getting requests from client, parses this data, and return responses with data, typically JSON data. So only this way. But a GraphQL API is generally not that different. It's also stateless client-independent API for exchanging data, but with higher query flexibility. And to understand that, I would show you it from the perspective of RESTful APIs limitations. So let's say in our REST API we have an endpoint that looks like that. We are just sending GET requests to posts, and as you might imagine, this would fetch us a post from our database, but it could also be from a file or anything like that, of course, like any other databases I mentioned. So it would look like that. But what if we don't need the content of other data? For example, here we received like ID, title, and content, but in some specific moment, we need only title and ID. How we can solve it? Well, the solution is, of course, to simply create more endpoints for that return different types of data. We can create a new REST API, for example, sending and GET request to post short to only return title and ID. But now, obviously, by the way, you could also, of course, use the same endpoint all the time and just parse or filter out the data you need on the front end. But then when you are sending a lot of unnecessary data over the wire, which is an issue, especially when you're working with mobile devices, and we would have a problem like a lot of endpoints and a lot of updating in case we need something to change. So it's actually not the best solution. So solution number 2 could be to use query parameters on our existing endpoints. You could accept query parameters like data equals short. And now obviously that is an option, but just as with the first solution, you always have to add it so that your front-end engineers can continue and you have this dependency between front-end and back-end. Additionally, your API might become pretty hard to understand because it might not be clear which query parameters can I set, which values can I set on this query parameter. So this is also not ideal. So ideal for apps where you often have different data requirements of different pages is to use GraphQL. So there we don't have the problems as I described before, because there, as you will find out, you have a rich query language that you use in your frontend to send it to the backend, which is then parsed on the backend and dynamically retrieves just the data you need. So it's almost like a database query language, which you use on the backend like SQL or MongoDB. How does GraphQL work? Well, we get our client, we got our server, and on the server you generally have your logic for interacting with the database, with files, anything like that. But now, what do you send to the client server when you're using GraphQL? In a GraphQL world, you only send one kind of request, and that is a post request. Typically, it's just GraphQL name. And so you only have one single endpoint where you send your HTTP request to, even for getting data. And why is it? Well, for post request, you can add a request body, and that request body will contain the query expression. And as we already know, GraphQL defines its own query language. You put it into a request body, and you just can't send request bodies on GET request, for example. So you put your query language expression into that request body, and that will be parsed on the server to then to do some magic on it, and then return you just the data you want. So this is an idea behind the GraphQL generally. So in GraphQL, we have queries. Now, such a GraphQL query would typically look something like this, and it's a JSON object like structure, where you have an operation type. Query would be for getting data. You also have other types like mutations, for editing or deleting or inserting data, or subscription for setting up real-time data subscription with using WebSockets. You also have the endpoints. You could call them, or the commands you can execute, and you define them as a developer on your backend for the available endpoints. And also then you have the fields you want to extract, and that is the flexible part, because you could in one place get the user with just a name, and in another place you could get name, age, and email. So that is exactly what you put into your query, which you send to your backend with, which is parsed there. So about operation types. Now, regarding these three operation types, as I mentioned, we got a query, which is analog to retrieve data, and we use a post request for that. But if we want to compare it to the REST API world, then this would be your equivalent for sending a GET request to some path. We also got mutations, which basically are used for everything that changes data. So what you previously handled with this post, put, page, or delete requests. And subscriptions, as I mentioned, it's used for setting real-time connections with WebSockets when you want to observe some changes, lifetime changes, actually. So yes, so to sum it up in a big picture, GraphQL, we have our client. We send a request to that single GraphQL endpoint on our server, and then there we set up our definition for queries, mutations, and possibly also subscriptions. In this definition, we are also using type definition because GraphQL uses a typed query language, which means we define the types of data that we work with, the types of data we return in a query, and so on. And these endpoints we define here. So these queries and mutations and subscriptions we define, these are connected to so-called resolvers, which are functions that contains our server-side logic. So, and if you compare that to the REST APIs, the definitions would be like your routes, and the resolvers would be your controllers, and that is how you can look at GraphQL. At this is how we will implement it actually. So okay, actually, how does GraphQL work? Again, to sum it up, it's normal node and possibly Express server. Of course, we can use, we are not limited to using only Express.js. By the way, we are also not limited to use it with Node. So GraphQL, its language is this GraphQL language approach can be used with any programming languages, just as REST API code. So yeah, you have one single endpoint, typically GraphQL, as I told a couple of times. Though you could change this, it could be changed, of course. Then you only use post requests because you put the query expression into the request body. Yeah, we are using post for getting data, not very usual. And you have resolvers on the server side that analyzes the request body and then do something with your data based on the query expression that you had in that body, and well, use some third-party packages for that parsing and so on. Yes, so actually I finished my presentation. We can try it out with some simple online available tools just to see how it works. Or we can go directly with some questions if anyone has them.
Yuri, thanks. Let me first start. But guys, please, if you have any questions, please feel so free to ask them. I would just ask you when you start to first introduce yourself, because as I said, even though most of you know me, but not everyone knows each other in this meeting. So just say a couple of words about yourself and then just ask a question for Yuri, okay? Yuri, just a quick question from what you said. I got an impression that GraphQL is good in some cases, and one of them would be if you are having a complex data structure, maybe with heterogeneous data, with different versatile data types. But what about if you have a solution in which data structure is pretty much simple? Is GraphQL is also anyway better than a usual REST API?
Actually,
at least what would you say in this case? Would you recommend using GraphQL in any case, or in some cases GraphQL and REST API can be interchangeable?
Actually, it depends on the solutions that we are going to reach. Like if it's very simple application, they are totally interchangeable. Main advantage of the GraphQL is when you have a very huge amount of data and it's being used by different services, maybe different applications, and in different places you are having you want to have different data structures. Like you don't need all the amount of data that backend can return you. So
thank you. All right,
Hi, Yuri, Subish here. I'm basically a solution architect. Have been focusing on Java-based technologies for the last 14 years. We just started working out something on GraphQL. Basically, I mean, I'm just running a proof of concept on the enhancement of my current application, which is actually a monolith application, and I'm trying to separate it out to different microservices. Okay, so one of the option I had in my mind was using GraphQL, but recently due to certain high priority items, I could not focus completely. But I have a question here. Basically, what are the infrastructure kind of requirements or needs are there for implementing GraphQL? Do I need to have a separate server, and what kind of server it should be? Basically, the technologies it is required, or the database which I need to apply. I mean, right now I'm still working on RDBMS. I have not moved into a NoSQL database yet, and I have say Elasticsearch in my mind, but it's all on paper right now. I haven't started implementing that. So what is your suggestion there, or what is your recommendation there?
actually, GraphQL it's just like a standard. So it's not limited to some specific technology. I believe you can find some maybe a framework for using GraphQL in like for your applications stack. And also like it's easily to implement to existing application as well, because you can start to add GraphQL like step by step. You can use it along with your existing like REST API. So like you if you want to like somehow improve application, you definitely can start with like small steps, very little one, and step by step you can substitute like old API with new that is using GraphQL. But yeah, definitely they could be used one by one without no problem.
Okay, yeah, thank
Is
you.
that what you want? Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Basically, see, I don't want to overwhelm the entire technology at first. I mean, basically, I want to try it one by one before I have a proper solution in place. So, yeah, that really explains. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your question. So, is there anyone who want to ask something more? Maybe didn't understand during
Hello, Yuri.
presentation.
Irshad here.
Hello,
Hello all. My name is Irshad. I'm a project lead based out of Munich. Yuri, I have one question. So what are the differences with regards to performance by implementing this GraphQL we can see in the application? So will it be any, like, will the speed would be good of the application, or what exactly it is?
Yeah, definitely. Like here we are talking about like network, and the amount of data that would be sent is like cost a lot of performance, let's say. Like if you have some generic endpoint in REST API that sends you whole bunch of data, this size could be like is one number. But when you're using GraphQL, you directly, when you're making request to the server, you're directly specifying the data fields that you need in this at this certain moment, and you receive only this bunch of data, and it would be definitely smaller than like if you are trying to fetch all the pack.
Okay, so we can specifically categorize which data we want, and we can fetch it.
Yeah, we will say like it's mostly it's very sensitive point for mobile devices. So when mobile device using some cellular connection, let's say, and it tries to fetch a lot of data, it will harm. At least for user, it's a data plan usage, and for applications performance, because we need more time to download all the data. So
Got it. Thank you, Uri.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I may go and ask a question.
Yeah.
Arslan, again, like Eshad, I'm also working in Munich as a software developer at the moment. Yeah, it seems like a neat solution for writing a lot of backend. I mean, instead of writing a lot of backends, I mean, and endpoints, you can basically clearly use this technology very easily to reach the resources you want. It's like, you know, writing one endpoint for everything, one to rule them all.
Yeah, by the way, if you're familiar with SQL, it's like just the same if you make some queries to database.
I actually, you know, like to see an example right now, but yeah, I have some questions also in my mind. I mean, how does filtering works, or how do you need to write the resolvers yourself from scratch? I mean, for every kind of possibility. I think it was resolvers, right? Maybe it's another. Yeah.
Actually, GraphQL is just like layer between your server-side logic, like business logic, that does the job of retrieving data from database. So in a like you're just writing GraphQL query, and then server, based on what you put in your query, makes some requests to the database. So it's mostly you can add like some filtering stuff, like maybe limits. You can specify in your query directly, like limit 10 records, and then when the server receives your request, it will just fetch 10 records from the database. So it's like GraphQL not does some logic. It just like the way how we specify what we want to get from the backend.
Okay.
And
so
the whole magic would be done on the server. And if you have some existing logic, it wouldn't. You don't need to change it actually. You can just use the same logic, and you're just reducing the size of endpoints when you're using GraphQL in this situation.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so it majorly simplifies the stuff for business end, and it just organizes the way you retrieve the data, or organize the way you think about how to send the data to the business logic or to the clients.
Exactly.
Cool. Thank you.
Yuri, if I may also add another question here, do you have any maybe some example which you can show us? And I would also like to return back to the first question from Subish. Maybe if you can maybe just very on a simple level, just explain how to start with GraphQL from scratch. What is needed for what kind of servers there are in scope to install, and maybe if I can also supplement this question with another one. Does it only work with JavaScript, or there are other programming languages it supports?
No, as I told, it's not works only with JavaScript or like Express.js and Node.js frameworks. It's like just a standard that Facebook created, and actually it can be used in different frameworks like some Python, JavaScript, Java. So it's like it's not limited to only some programming language and some specific framework. So there is no problem with this. I believe that definitely you can find for any like nowadays popular frameworks and languages, you can find some solutions with this, and you can work with this. For showing some use cases, I just want to let me stop sharing here. I want to show you how to say small live coding, maybe how the GraphQL could be worked. So normally when you set up your application, backend application, you can add some small flag that will turn on such graphical interface for you. So you don't need actually use the developers would understand me. We have such Postman tool, pretty popular one to make some query request to the backend, but GraphQL already has it. We can just select some endpoint. I found also over the internet some endpoints that could help me with like dummy data. So this is how it looks like. GraphQL interface. It has very nice documentation explorer. Like if you created something, you just click on queries and you will get all possible queries that you can do. And as it is a typed language, you also can see what data you should pass to this and what you will get in the result. So, for example, if you want to get a list of users, I would type this. It also has a autocomplete. Sorry, users. Actually, query, it's what we like compared to REST. It's like a GET request. Here we specify user, it's our endpoint. And then we just can type what fields we want to have. Like, for example, ID, name. Here we don't have any commas or columns. So it just like spaced with the spaces, like, sorry, I forgot this word. And like, for example, user has more fields, but if we, oops, we have some problem. Field user. Okay. Because I want users. Okay, user. Because, sorry, live session, we have a data that we need to parse. Data. Now it should work. Yeah. Here, for example, we have a list of users, but we can add some other. Let's see what else we have. Company, maybe username. We just add these couple of fields to the query and hit enter. We have extra data. Very simple and just with this small change. Oops. Like this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and also I can show you some imitation if you want, or maybe somebody has some questions right now. I would like to hear maybe and answer them. Meantime, I can do.
Sure. This is Subish again, Yuri.
Yeah.
Can you show me something related to the mutation? I mean, this is absolutely brilliant. I'm really, I'm really happy to see this is getting delivered. So I would like to see what mutation can bring.
Mutation, yes, sure. Okay, let me go first with the documentation. Like documentation section, we have a list of available mutations. Let's say I want to update our user. Like that is how I change this query to mutation, and it means like we're using our post, patch, or delete APIs endpoint, like in traditional REST. Here I need to change this. We have update user. We need to specify an ID. Let it be 1. And we need to specify some input data that we are going to change. So let it be name. I want to change it to like test 1, 2, 3, 4. Not very unique name, but for this moment it would be okay. And we need to specify as well return structure, what we want to get. So let it be name, ID, and I think it will be enough for now. Yes, and here we go. We have updated user with a new name and ID 1.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, as well, we can add some extra username data. So very simple for now.
All right, guys. Do you have any additional question? I suggest maybe the next one be the last, and if you have any additional questions, please just let me know or contact Yuri, and we can continue this conversation even after this webinar is finished.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just ping me or write in our DevArc, and if you have any extra additional question, I will be happy to answer you.
All right. So just anyone, the last question? Okay, let me then be the last one here, Yuri. One of my personal interests in GraphQL was that mostly in our solutions here in DevArc, we have been using till now REST API, and I kind of was I was wondering in general, what do you think? Using GraphQL is any more promising than using REST APIs for mobile applications? And if an existing solution already uses REST API, would you recommend changing that to GraphQL? And if yes, then why? What maybe obstacles would you see on the way to that?
Actually, right now, in one of our last projects, we have this kind of an issue, I believe. We have a lot of endpoints that are mostly used for very similar stuff, like we are retrieving very similar data, just with some small differences. And this backend we are using for mobile application, and actually that would be useful for them, because this way we, like in this approach, we would avoid like extra data usages. This would help us to increase performance. And actually we can try to implement this in future, because currently it would be actually harmless, because we don't break anything. We just can, as I told previously, just start implement this step by step, one by one, and we can try to see the advantages of this. So at least if you want, so yeah, definitely we can use it.
Understand. Thank you. So thank you everyone for taking part in this webinar. I will share later a record of that if you want to, and I also encourage you, if you have any additional questions, please let me know about that, or if you want to contact Yuri, please feel free to do that also. So yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for this session. It was really insightful. Wow. So I will connect with you over LinkedIn, and if there is any question, of course, yeah, sure. and please share your YouTube channel so that I can subscribe.
Oh yeah, sure, I will. Thank you, Subish.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Valentin. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.